Hello, everyone. My name is Bronson Dameron. I'm the Director of Content here at AwardCo. And I'm going to be the moderator today, and it is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, Sean Reibel, who is the founder and principal consultant of Game Plan Total Rewards Consulting. Sean is an old friend. We've worked together for a long time, and I'm really excited to kind of help grease the wheels and help Sean you get your message out there. So, Sean, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself just a little bit more?
All right. Thank you, Bronson. Hello, everybody. Thanks for dialing in. So I'm dialing in from Vancouver, BC, Canada. So I've been in Total Rewards HR for 25, almost 26 years, and it was 20 years in-house, kind of leading kind of Total Rewards and HR operations for different companies, like 30 plus countries. Had a lot of fun. And then 6 years ago, went on my own. And so we've been supporting clients with Total Rewards, HR ops, and workplace mental health solutions everywhere from 20 employees in a small town in Saskatoon to large multinational employers that are maybe implementing Workday or doing global compensation frameworks. So real mix. And why really with this topic, I've been working with a couple clients, really starting to look at more in the space of pay transparent, pay equity, decolonization of our HR practices and specifically in compensation. So I've been kind of on a learning journey and an unlearning journey of these frameworks and what they mean, regardless of whether it's Canada or US or different provinces or states. There's more and more in the press. So being in Total Rewards for this many years, you think you see it all, but you haven't, right? And I think what's really cool is be able to share some thoughts today. So excited to walk you through some material and hopefully give you a few nuggets of information that you can take back to your organization. So.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean, for being here. And to all of our viewers today, we are monitoring the chat. I'm in there and I'm monitoring it. So please feel free to ask questions during the webinar, and I'll make sure that those get posed and that we are asking those and we're kind of having a great discussion. But until that time, let us know where you're viewing from. Let us know where around the world you're sitting in and you're watching it on your laptop or anything like that. We're excited to have you here. So, Sean, as we get started here, you mentioned that you have been a consultant for large and small companies. Have you found any parallels just as we get into this conversation of human after all, designing those human-centered total reward strategies? I know that there are lots of differences between big and small organizations as far as designing those strategies. What are some of the parallels that you've seen in your work as we dive into the conversation?
Yeah, I think the parallels comes from the kind of the intention, right? That we're actually trying to have different conversations that go beyond just gender. We're actually starting to look at different equity groups, and maybe where there are biases or things in our system, whether it's on the compensation side or starting to look at our benefits and time off policy. So that seems to be where parallels are happening, is we're going beyond just gender and looking at intersectionality as well. I think the other big piece is that there's more technology and data platforms for all size organizations that you can start to actually look at your data differently. It's not just for the big behemoth companies. There are some smaller providers, and so there's access to technology to start looking at the data, right? And that's really an important piece. And the third piece is then trust in data. So working with employees to be able to share more of themselves so that we can start doing some of those analytics and sentiment analysis by connecting our total rewards, what we're offering versus the demographics. And so whether it's veterans information or those that identify part of a certain community, there's still a trust piece that we're still working on. And where does this data go? How are you going to use it? So you can make informed decisions, but I think there's still that journey of how we do this, but it's actually the change management side is so huge, regardless of size of company.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love in chatting with you, I love some of the things that you've shared with me over the years, but especially one thing recently as we've been prepping for this webinar, the conversation around DEI has changed over the last, I don't know, 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate your perspective that it's about human-centered, it's about inclusion, it's about making sure that people are cared for. And that is really something I think that you bring to the table so well, and I'm excited to learn from you. So walk us through some of these learning objectives as what can we expect from the webinar today?
Yeah, so we've jam-packed as usual. If you've seen me do a webinar before, I have trouble cutting content. So, but basically, we want to understand how do you bring data together, right? In terms of, and then obviously this drives our engagement and those kind of reaction, those kind of rewards for our employees, but also then for the organization. How do we talk to our leaders? Many times it's about getting a buy-in or building a business case around this. Some strategies, right, around human-centered. So whether you call it DEI, JEDI, or just
Mhm.
human-centered, right? Some principles when we are in a landscape, we're using certain terminology, and whether it's in US or Canada, there are different perspectives and different journeys we're on with what we call things. But at the end of the day, it's about fairness and equitable practices. And so we're using the term human-centered throughout today. Some real examples of projects I've been on or working on still, where we're really learning and unlearning and kind of bringing that forward. And we're going to focus a lot on some compensation side, but also get into some of the benefits, time off pieces at the end, and a little bit about technology and some things to avoid, but also some like questions to ask, right? Some of the workshops I've done with organizations and total rewards leaders, if those are joining today, is around where do I start? What are the questions I should be asking myself, but also my leaders or my employees to get a sense of where we are with this stuff. So.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So, as we begin here, I want to ask you, why is it so important to anchor total rewards in equity and human-centered principles now? What has changed?
Yeah. I mean, the key is I think it's there's an awareness, right? I think you're getting a lot more conversation from employees asking to kind of think about these things and it's going, is this working for me? Whatever it's a benefit program or time off or are I being paid fairly? Because you're getting with AI and different tools, people are putting in, am I paid fairly? What should I get paid? I was just talking to just an executive going, I put my salary through ChatGPT. Am I paid properly? Like people are using the tools day to day, not just for support, but also like checking, is this fair?
Yeah.
It's kind of always been the right thing to do. Even if I'm doing this a long time, it's the right thing to do, right? And I think what we're trying to see is, there is a kind of return on investment. There's different studies of how when you invest in these things, how does this impact your organization's engagement, retention, and overall kind of business success? And so I love these kind of stats where where are employees making those decisions? They are looking for those diverse workplaces, those that are investing in human-centered practices, DEI, JEDI, however you want to call it. They're driving engagement, 2 to 3 times more than those that aren't doing it. And so, okay, well, what does that mean? Right? I pulled a couple things together to show you some of the ROI and the stuff. And I think if you're in HR, you're in total rewards, you kind of get the equation, right? Happy employees, happy customers throughout. But I think it's going and saying a little bit deeper, saying, well, why are they happy? And are we asking the right questions? And when engagement surveys and kind of those types of things we've been doing for years, we need to evolve them, right? We need to ask maybe different questions or look at intersectionality and again, understanding our people, right? And so we don't may not understand how they identify or are they feel comfortable to do that. We cover up a lot about ourselves, and we're going to talk about some studies that came up about that. But I think it's just evolved. There's a richness there. There's some fear, right? That's even greater for employees and on from the employer side of talking about it. Do I share this? Do I ask this question? And I think it's just coming to terms of, building that strategy with this in mind. So we're going to kind of show you how to do that. Um,
Yeah.
I put this up because I think it's important we have this word justice or Jedi in the concept is really understanding those societal and structural inequalities, where there can be colonialism and how we build things and where things have come from that we may not be aware of a term we use or where the word stakeholder came from as example. That actually came from staking land, right? In terms of back in the day. And so there's other words like rights holders or different words we can use. Just actually just understanding the language we've been just using every day that sometimes actually has meaning stuck in colonial or other interesting events in time
Yeah.
that maybe have a darker or shadow side to it. So we're learning about some of these things that around reconciliation with Indigenous, about the lands that we're on and that we work and play on. And I think knowing the history, knowing being able to learn and unlearn, I think it's critical. And then we get into the equity, diversity, inclusion. We all see these terms, and it's just where are you at with your organization with these things? Do you talk about this stuff, or does your compensation team talk to your DI or employee relations? Are they talking? Are you talking as a combined team about where this all can fit together? So I
Yeah.
always like to start with the kind of the definitions of those things. So
Yeah, I love that. And as we kind of get into this question, before I ask this one, want to ask one other thing. So a lot of our viewers today are HR leaders and people that are invested in this kind of thing already. What
yeah.
are some ways that you've found HR leaders can get other people's buy-in? I know that's a huge question, and we could have a webinar
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this alone. But
yeah,
I want to give some of our viewers some takeaways, like around this specifically. How can people or how can HR leaders get that buy-in? Because
yeah,
HR leaders generally feel that already, but how can they go to a
yeah.
leader who doesn't feel that way and help them understand?
Yeah. And so I bring this one up because I think it's the case, right? So we think about the drivers of engagement and there's different models, but do I belong and can I thrive? It's kind of in the bar there. And this was a quote from a CHRO as we were working with the CEO and the board on our total reward strategy. It's like, do I belong and can I thrive here? I want my employees to feel that way, right? And so you think about all these different rewards as part of it, right? And so we want to make sure they're as inclusive and equitable and fair as we do. But there's all these pieces that drive engagement. And then we come back to the metrics, right? Productivity, reducing regrettable turnover, improving
Mm,
our experience and brand, and start looking at these metrics. Absenteeism, financial performance, you'll see revenue for those companies that invest is higher than those that don't invest in this type of space. And even safety records. So I even did studies 20 years ago for a large retailer where we could actually see if we moved a manager too fast, a really great manager from maybe a poor performing store to another store, like, oh no, you fixed it. Now you kept moving these great managers too quickly through the organization to go fix the next store or help with that. You actually were impacting revenue, profitability, safety, engagement. When we held that manager and said, you know what, stay there for at least 18 months to 24 months, we saw that stickiness, a real change. If we moved them too fast, we weren't seeing the change. So we actually could see in the data the impact the manager has, that general manager has of a store, of an operating location. But if you move them too quick, they actually have trouble getting that traction and increasing. And we actually ran the numbers before, did different trials over a period of time, and actually seeing build talent policies around where we move our talent and how quickly. So it really does. There is data for every industry piece about where you're starting from, what are your
mm,
policies you're doing, and that can impact your bottom line as well, which is, you want to see shrink go down, you want to see less safety risk issues. And the data is there. I think that's kind of where you're kind of looking at your organization of like, where's the real fires? Where are we starting at? And if we do these things, are we actually seeing a change on those things? There's been some articles around, Fortune 100 companies that are investing and looking at kind of revenue per employee. And so I just love looking at these studies where companies do invest, they are seeing the return on that investment. And then you're building those business, it's all connected, right? And so you need to go as HR professionals in the shoes of the operators, of the finance team, like where are the ins, where are the outs? How can we be part of this? Because then sometimes we're all on the same page, seeing the thing from our chair, from our lived experience, what the problem really is. So making sure we are all connected to the business strategy, but there's a people strategy, there's a Jedi or a human-centered lens to the strategy. And yes, what's in that envelope that we're offering? Do they even know what we offer? Right? So I think that's kind of the thing, and we're intentional about those things. And there's a nice weave between all that that's really connecting to from employee experience all the way through your business success. So to me, this is like my go-to reminder when we do a total word strategy, we're taking it up a notch, saying, do we understand the business strategy? Because if the
mm.
strategy is going to keep changing, or we're not clear on that, or the structure's not really clear, we're going to go with a reorg, or we're putting a whole new ERP in. It's hard to really stabilize total rewards when the strategy or the structure or the people keep changing. So you have to have that kind of like focus and connection.
Yeah, I love that. Linking that business strategy to these initiatives is so important because
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are actual benefits. And I think too often leaders will they see the benefit, but they're like, I'm so busy. I've got so many other things on my mind.
Yeah.
But this is
Yeah.
an absolute revenue driver among many other things.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
The last piece was this is from Deloitte, and we were presenting actually with at the event last year in Salt Lake City, in Park City, Utah. And this was done over a 10-year period, the same study, and how much people cover up about themselves, right? And how does this impact our employees and how they feel? So there's these kind of a sense that we cover up who we are, how we identify, who we affiliate, who we support, right? And there was some great studies here and stats around those that identify part of different communities, or you have BIPOC, disabilities or not, how they feel about advantages or promotion opportunities, right? So there's data that we haven't really moved the dial, right? So how does it feel to be in your workplace? Do you feel there's a fair opportunities to grow your career, to move up the ladder or across, or whatever that looks like? and we cover up a lot about ourselves, right? And so I think that we changed maybe 1 percentage point over a 10-year period. So we've done a lot of, talk about improving more awareness around more human-centered DEI practices, but have we moved the dial, right? And so what I thought was interesting is that maybe we haven't as much, and people are still afraid to show who they truly are to the degree that they're safe and comfortable. But being identified as part of the queer community, for many years I did not share that in the workplace for fear of how that may impact my career. So I know how this feels. And in the last 10, so the first 10, nope, not saying anything. Yes, I have a girlfriend, I have a wife, all that stuff. And then I
Yeah.
changed the tune. I felt comfortable, right? So sometimes a personal journey, but also the environment. And so, I think it is something that we have to be mindful of is how much are we covering up about ourselves or who we support or how we affiliate and be honest about that. There's things happening in our world now that it's important that we don't discount the realities that our employees are facing in their communities as well, like and being honest about that, the support systems that are there for them. How do we show up and be an honest versus, kind of like not talk about it? Like I think it's good to talk about some of the uncomfortableness, but have a safe place for that from a mental health and psychologically safe workplace. So could go on and on about this one, but I think it's an important nugget to kind of think about is where your organization at in terms of psychologically safe environments. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
No
And
problem.
move, moving forward here,
Moving on.
how can organizations go from that human-centered intent to a human-centered driven design? Because the intent often is there, but maybe the drive isn't. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I think this is the one that I've been evolving this model that I wanted to share with our listeners today. I feel like we're on a podcast.
I
So,
know, yeah.
hey, thanks for those chiming in. Colorado, we got Minnesota, Ohio. Thank you so much. As I always call it, about the sweet spot. So I had an EVP of total rewards that I reported through many layers to this EVP, and I always kept this with me. And is the sweet spot. You're kind of balancing the business strategy affordability with the external marketplace and what's happening there, which is always fun. And then these employee preferences and perspectives. So they prefer this, they want more of this benefit, they want more time off, they want whatever it is. Everybody wants more money, 5%. So, but the
Yeah.
perspectives, then perspectives is the evolution, is the chair that I lived in, how I look at things. And that could change. Tomorrow I could go through something and my perspective of life or how I look at my relationship with work could change, right? So perspectives evolve, right? But I think it's understanding that whole person, that human-centered side, as we mentioned earlier, allows us to kind of stress test our programs and look for things that could be improved. So these are kind of the main 6 buckets that we kind of really anchor in around equal pay for equal work. There's a lot of work around pay equity in different states and different countries have different places on that in terms of the journey that they're on. Same in Canada. There's different rules for different provinces or federally regulated or not. Fairness, inclusion, opportunities for advancement, attraction and retention, transparency and trust, and that could be beyond just your pay ranges or how you do pay, and then data-driven insights. So these are kind of the areas you want to focus in when you're starting to think about kind of what's that sweet spot for your organization from a human-centered kind of total rewards envelope that you're creating, is kind of thinking it from those kind of different pockets, basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and the real question real quick here, sorry
sure.
to interrupt you here. Do
Yeah,
you
that's
feel
okay.
like for an organization who might be just getting off the ground with this kind of thing and finding that sweet spot, out
Yeah.
of these 6 items here, do you feel like there is one that
Mm.
is either easier or more important to focus on first? I mean, that's a big question, but
All of
I'm
them. I mean,
genuinely
I
curious.
think I think it's all. I mean, it's hard to really pick. Some are easier to maybe get at, but I think having data is critical. So you know where you're starting at as you invest in programs. So I would definitely get your data. Where you at with your data journey
Mhm.
around that. I think building transparency and trust is so important. And so a lot of that is if we can't hang our hat on, let's say, a performance review system that gives me a rating. If there's things I don't trust about that rating, I won't trust the compensation. So there are elements in this that you can kind of go back through the value chain and say, if we don't have trust in upstream processes that then lead to our compensation. So each one's a little bit different, how you do your postings and are you clear around how you attract and retain and what the story's like when you come into the work at our organization. It's fast paced. We have these expectations, but we have these great benefits. And so being more honest about that relationship. And if somebody leaves your organization, how do you treat them, right? Is like, I can't believe they left, never come back. Or "Well, you're welcome back anytime. If they were a good performer, then you create a different energy when you're like, all the best to you. We're here. I'm glad you were able to graduate to another place. but
Mhm.
you're welcome back depending on their performance. But like I think there's elements where you can break them down into smaller, like what could I do first that would then lead into other pieces. Yeah, good question. I kind of bring this one up because I also go around the wheel of total rewards and there's different visuals of what's in the envelope or the total rewards package. Um, and they always call the win versus play. So when we do like total rewards strategy work, it's like, what do you need just to play for talent? Like in that P50, like just you need to have a decent wage, decent benefits, health, dental, But then where do you want to win? Where do you want to differentiate? Whatever that is. Maybe it's on an element here around your training investment, around volunteer time, or maybe on compensation or variable pay. You want to win. You want to be P75, top quartile. So where do you want to play versus where do you want to win? And then bringing in these layers, which is kind of where the evolution the last few years is like from a Jedi perspective, human-centered lens, testing those things, that well-being, mental health, huge, right? And that's
Yeah.
so important. The intersectionality with disability programs, time off program. I mean, well-being is a whole topic in itself, but it's peppered into these financial well-being, right? Compensate. So well-being needs to have its own kind of strategy and connection to it. And then how are you transparent around how things are built, how things are communicated? It's such an important, not just here's the hiring range. It's more than that. It's
Mm.
transparency, and you build a transparency model around total rewards. Who are your benchmarks? How do I get promoted here? Like there's a transparency to all of this stuff so that people even understand how it works. And so then if it's more transparent, I will trust the system. My
Yeah.
relationship goes up, engagement goes up, da, 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 da. So
Yeah. I
um,
love this because Awardco is employee rewards and recognition and fits in a lot of these different tiles here.
oh yeah,
Not
talent
not
management.
everyone perfectly, but a lot of
Yeah,
times we're finding in our with our clients that they are finding success both winning and playing with employee rewards and recognition, engagement solutions, things like that.
yeah,
DEI with employee resource groups, well-being initiatives. That's really cool to see all those kind of tie together to see where people win and where they
yeah.
play. That's really cool.
Yeah, when we build these out, we kind of take each element and we go, where are we at? What do we need to do so that you have a roadmap? Some of these things take time. You can't do
Yeah.
it all at once too, right? So you got to prioritize. And when you build your comp philosophy, you think about, what are your pay drivers, internal equity, transparency, market positioning, governance and practices. So that middle blue wheel is where we a lot of focus on. What's
Mm.
new is bringing that Jedi human-centered lens to it, saying when compensation aligns with Jedi principles or human-centered principles, it supports an environment where everyone feels valued and has equal opportunities, right? That's the piece I belong, I can thrive, right? And when we assume that everybody has the same and that we have from a lived experience, look at these opportunities and go, no, we know from the Deloitte study that a lot of us won't even, that we actually perceive that the awareness, what we see in the makeup of our management team, what's the equity, the diversity of teams. How are decisions made? Like, there's great conversations about this. How do we remove biases, unconscious biases from promotional and hiring decisions and pay decisions? And oh, well, this person asked for a counteroffer, so we gave it to them. Well, there's risk with that. What about the other people that didn't say anything, that same performance, same. So, you create
Mm.
risks that you may not be aware of. So yeah, I love kind of taking that approach, and then what we're going deeper in our space is around, when you think about reconciliation and understanding the lands that we work and play, and kind of the real history and the colonization of HR practice, business practices. As an example, like, do you need to have a bachelor's degree for this job, or not? Like some of these things are just kind of set. Well, that we always say, degree must have a bachelor's degree. Do you, right? And how do I define work? So decolonization kind of goes a little bit deeper. It's undoing those colonial structures and just adding more inclusive elements, how decisions get made, looking at where power is sitting, right?
Yeah.
I'm loving this space because I'm learning and unlearning through this journey. And so for me, it's, the concept value traditional knowledge, you're addressing biases potentially, in competency assessment. You're recognizing
Right.
the value relationships and community contributions and that lived experience, traditional knowledge, and reflecting that lived experience. So these are kind of the five areas you acknowledge and address your wage gaps. You adopt that community-driven, culture responsive approach to things, redesign job descriptions and profiles, look at those processes for hiring and promotions and pay decisions, like who's involved, right? So you kind of remove those biases and you're kind of checking, like, yeah, that was a fair decision. It makes sense. We can be transparent around that. and you're measuring what matters, not just the output, but also the impact that's having. And so there's a whole growing research study around this stuff, and we're doing this live work, and it's really fascinating to kind of unlearn too some pieces and say, do we need that? Is this the right
Yeah.
way to do this? Do we just write it the same way we've been writing it for 25, 50 years? Or do we look at things a little bit different that really speak to the heart of like the different experiences people bring to the table from different communities, maybe new to their country, right? That have tons of experience, maybe not it's accredited yet, in where they're living now in Canada, US. So how do we respect that? Really challenging stuff, but good stuff. So
Yeah, it's part of being in a global workforce, right? You have to take everything to an account. I really appreciate that. And that kind of leads to this next question. Can you walk us through an example of how an organization can take that human-centered design approach to
perfect.
like specifically compensation, say?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, this is the one where you're spending more of the time. As you can tell, I get very excited by this topic, so I'll just apologize for speaking too fast. We just wanted to hit all the content, but I'm just going to offer now, and I'll say it again at the end. If you do want to talk more about any of the stuff covered today, please reach out. Happy to have quick chats with anybody. I will not charge for my time. I just want to be able to get the word out and support and learn together. So it's a broader community when it comes to this. So the first thing we do is making sure that we're doing a bit of a survey and some focus groups, asking kind of these questions. So, really thinking about how do your current practice help or hinder the ability to attract diverse talent. So these are kind of questions we actually used with an organization to really get a sense of from our leaders and from our employees and having conversations about where are we at, right? How do we ensure that pay decisions align with our commitment, right, to human-centered practices or JEDI? What barriers might exist, right, to prevent equitable access to promotion or salary increase opportunities? Where are there inconsistencies? And then how do we measure success that we've actually made a change in advancing this? And it's not an easy, there could be more questions. You could run it through an AI bot if you wanted to. Hey, give me some more questions in the spirit of this. But I wanted to give you like real examples of starting with a bit of where you at. So then you can start to say, it's amazing what can come out of stuff. You're like, oh, I didn't even know about that, or that's a one-off for one organization or one part of the organization, but we want to give it a sound and give it weight. So those kind of surveys and then following up with focus group to understand the intention. So it's going beyond kind of standard engagement questions, but really focusing on specifically compensation. You could broader it to all of total rewards. You can talk about benefits and other things too. So this is just from a comp lens.
Mm,
The second piece is the job as your anchor, right? And so we all know, yeah, job descriptions are our favorite topics, and there's lots of tools to help you write job descriptions and do that. So the key things is looking for biased language. There's a lot of AI tools to test for that. Gender neutral, inclusive language. Just even that alone, that's obviously been hot in the last few years with AI developments and better and more tools than we've ever had to help us test that. So I love it. I'm loving that. Unnecessary inflated requirements like degrees or education that we don't need them. So just really being mindful of that because you could be preventing talent from even applying. That commitment that you want in your job descriptions and postings, and then tying back to your kind of career framework. And so it's kind of small here, but we start writing these like an entry level professional. They're foundational connection jobs. They're contributing in this way. Just really not taking off the box, off the shelf definitions, but really writing from an inclusive, equitable, decolonized perspective. It's really the language actually is a lot more exciting and interesting and kind of makes it matter more. It's more purpose driven. So if you're a nonprofit or you're for whatever your organization's intention is, it's actually customizing. These are our entry level jobs, but they sure are impactful. And this is what they mean to our customers and our community. And as you go to more senior jobs and through leadership, it's more empowering. So I'm actually really enjoying rewriting job capsules with this
mm,
lens because it's not just about, oh, just run it through an AI. It's actually, what is the purpose of this job, right? And how does it connect to our strategy? It's a really interesting work. It's more than just an HR exercise. It's actually quite impactful. So then when you have new jobs or hybrid jobs or things, you can start to kind of test against this framework going, well, this actually speaks more to what our jobs are supposed to do. And it's a little more exciting for when you share some of this stuff with your employees and managers of how jobs are slotted and organized in your framework. So definitely something to consider, and been enjoying the last few years doing more in this space. And then your job evaluation methodology. So everybody's got points or factor systems. Point systems are a little bit better. You remove a little bit more subjectivity. I do a lot of pay equity work, especially in Canada for federal. I've done Ontario, Quebec as well. So you do want responsibilities, skills, effort, working conditions, and points will do help. And weighting helps you ensure there's equal distribution of value of jobs in terms of what they're doing, their impact and contributions. But we are trying to also continue to look at working conditions and like mental fatigue, right? And so burnout and kind of what does that feel like in terms of emotional labor for a call center role or one that's out there first responders or right versus back office. So really making kind of not just physical and sensory work, but just flushing that work mental fatigue piece out. Thinking about well-being and mental health. Actually adding language to this factor has been really impactful for my clients. So.
Yeah, I tell you, I used to work in a call center for 8 years, many years
Mhm.
ago, and
Yeah,
that was fatiguing work, not physically, but emotionally and mentally. It was a
yeah,
lot. So I totally get what you're saying there.
totally, totally. Yeah, no, and I think it's these building blocks, right? You think about your job library and evaluation approach. Those are your foundations to building your
Yeah.
compensation bands and structures, to educating people about how they can grow their careers. And it's about, oh, it's a lattice. I can go from here to here and then up. Like these foundational pieces are around forever, but it's just taking a different lens at it and saying, can we do it better? And we can. And I think that's, not everybody's in the same place of the journey, but you can call it human-centered or whatever you want to call it. It's about getting something that's a little bit more aligned to your people and your business, your organization, and looking at it from different lenses that different seats that people are in. And I've had a lot of like I've done so many focus groups and sessions, but I love this one leader, said about being in a strong chair. You'll hear me say that a lot more now because she's like, give me a good comp framework that I feel like I'm in a strong chair. I can sit and understand it myself, but talk to my employees about it. I feel like this chair is wobbly. I feel like I'm sitting in a beanbag, like I need a don't give me a beanbag, give me a solid chair when it comes to compensation and setup. And I think that's what a lot of this work is giving us a solid chair. But also the other analogy is we all come into life every day in from our lived experience from a chair that we sit in. So we can sit around a circle and actually go, well, tell me about your experience. How do you see these things? Right? What brought you to today? And listening in that circle kind of approach is anchored in indigenous and kind of an equitable way of looking at things and understanding our lived experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
small sidetrack, but I think I wanted to share. I think that we can continue to learn even after 25 years doing this. I think it's a matter of understanding ourselves, understanding others, and passing the mic. Right, that's important. Like, is to pass the mic and not always hold the mic. Today I have to hold the mic, but I think
Yeah,
this
but that's
other
what that's a webinar, right? Like you're
but
holding
I
the
like
mic.
like on this one project we brought in a DEI expert, right, into the project to do when we did the RFP. It's like I'm bringing a DEI expert into the project to do this work so that I'm also passing the mic too. So yeah, which I
Sure.
think is why we
Yeah.
got the work. But anyways, the pay disparities on this slide, internal equity, yes, and fairness. We talk about those things, but thinking about other words, what does fair mean, right? Equitable, unbiased, just, impartial, inclusive. So we're just seeing words evolve to when we think about definitions, what do they mean for your organization? And then getting after not just gender, but other racial or ethnic gaps or other equity groups, and that intersectionality piece. So just looking at the data, there are large organizations doing this. Now, I was at World of Work conference and we heard some large beverage companies talking about doing this work from intersectionality because they had the data and not just
Mhm.
comp, but all programs. I'm really excited that some of the big companies that have some of the bigger budgets are doing this work to find insights for biases in their own and or lack of access for certain groups in their organization that aren't accessing some of their programs. They want to know, well, why have we done something that's not intentional to exclude a group? Yeah.
Yeah. It's important work, you
It
know.
is, right? I think this is just that pay equity transparency. Like we were all, and there's stuff that's came out. I know California has a new pay equity and pay transparency law that's coming out for next year, and you got to keep on top of those things by state, by city, and by country. And so,
Yeah.
but I think the bona fide requirements of when you can differentiate pay are continue to be important about the job, about performance. Location can still be, but those bona fide reasons and really testing that. I always like to do the California, New York test when we do the US work. It's just pick me the highest states that have the most robustness, and then we see if we can apply those nationally. And same in Canada. We got stuff in BC that's different in Ontario or Manitoba. So you try and do what you can to keep things simple, and sometimes you got to use some of the states that have the more they've been doing it a bit longer.
Mm.
I find that interesting. And then I said this earlier, and we had this event, there was an event with a lawyer up on stage, and all the comp people ran to the lawyer. So the one thing she said was this counter offers and just they can be set, they're called situational pay risks, right? We were offering it to that person. They're great. They were getting an offer. Well, what about the other people? Same job, same tenure, same performance, same city. Like, did you
Mm,
look at everybody else? Because if what if shouldn't they get something too, right? So just being really careful. And that's something to talk to with your executives and leaders. And we do this directly with managers and say, before you do a counter offer, what's the process? Who do you check with first? All right. What are the
sure.
things we need to understand before we go and do it? Just be really careful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
The last piece on comp, as we go into the next section, I think this is the last slide. Let's see. This is your many gifts with purchase day, is transparency. So you see these spectrums, the what to woe, right? So this is my paycheck. The woe is open ranges, and so a lot more public sector, unionized workplace. This is our grid, right? So they've been around forever like that. They've always had the woe.
Yeah.
Um, but organizations are trying to get to that. A lot of their 3 to 4. So here's our strategy around comp. Here's where your pay is positioned and where you can grow it. This is why we pay what we do. You're doing more manager training on, comp 101, comp 102. And I see organizations are getting better. I work with probably like 10, 15 companies a year, and I'm seeing a lot more do work in education. So you just want to make sure that you're creating those clear and transparent processes that are accessible to all. You're communicating how decisions are made, and they're using those proper factors as mentioned earlier. And that manager training is so important to try and mitigate unconscious bias. So they're just really understanding the impacts of their decisions into their teams, but also, hey, your team got all these we didn't get anything. Like, so people talk, right? People throw it through ChatGPT, and this is a little visual in the bottom corner of one of the British Columbia pay transparency reports, which pretty much most organizations by next year will have to do a public pay transparency report. And it is creating the impetus for more work in this space. I think it's a great thing. And so there's tons of work on what the government's asking us to produce, but then also the additional supplemental stuff that organizations are providing around how pay works to their organization. It is pushing it, which is the intention of these laws. And I think organizations like, oh, I had a COO going, where does this report go? Like publicly, like, oh man, are we ready
Yeah.
for this? And so like, it's not just what you post on a pay band. It's you have to look at all these pieces because it's not just the candidates see it, but your employees see it, your managers see what you're paying people. And it is there's a scramble happening
Yeah.
as for many organizations with this space. So I just thought I'd share. I'm with you, whoever's going through this, and just have a plan and have work. What do they call it? Build a plan, work the plan. So
Yeah. Build a plan, work the plan. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And that's a tough plan to work, but we're getting there, right? We'll get there.
yeah. I probably very scared of people. They're like, oh, this is too much.
Maybe, but it's a good thing to think about is just to like we need to be that transparent, right? So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Moving on here, what are some of the best practices to make performance drivers feel more authentic and equitable? Like, how do we
yeah,
make them more human-centered, as we've been
yeah,
talking about?
yeah. So this is one I was playing around with this. So. I talked earlier, I think there's annual performance reviews for sure. So we
Mm,
look at the processes, how do we train managers? I think the readiness to say, oh, we actually have rock stars and superstars. Well, are those validated and calibrated across the organization? And I think organizations are like, yeah, until we're ready, we don't want to tie comp to those ratings if we're not calibrated and fair and trusted, right?
yeah,
So I think that's a really important piece is to spend time there. And then your recognition programs, they should reflect the culture, not only perks, but really take that lens and have those committees going, is there anything we're missing here? Can everybody access this from different, capabilities or abilities or lived experience or different chairs so they feel seen? So that's a really important one because you can really drive some amazing results by your recognition program design. And on being respectful of private versus public recognition and different preferences. Like I was at a company for many years, and the part of the and I used to work in talent development, so I was doing performance programs. And the first
uh,
thing we would ask is the get to know you section. So as a manager, get to know your employees. How do they like to be recognized, public or private? We were asking that at the beginning, right? So that we knew as a manager that this person hates to be public. So you're not going to go, right?
that's a good thing to
Hey,
know ahead of
Sally's
time.
amazing. So have a get to know you section, put it in there, ask the question. Like, that's not hard, but most companies don't do it. So, anyways,
Yeah,
I just want to call that out. I think it's such a
yeah.
simple thing to do.
For sure.
One thing you do from today is go ask, put a get to know you section in your annual performance
Yeah.
process cycle and ask that question.
Yeah.
Promotion, go ahead. Yeah.
Like I don't mean to like derail you here.
No,
Apologies
that's
about that.
fine.
But I
No, no,
keep
you're
thinking
good.
about so a workout just came out with personal profiles where you can do that, where
Yeah.
you someone enters in all their information and you can get to know them beforehand, even before you start recognizing them or
Yeah.
creating
Mm,
ERGs or culture
yep.
groups or incentive programs. And that's really powerful. We found it really powerful internally. So
Yeah. It's great those connections, right? There's some cool software out there that where people can actually create more connections across their
yeah,
organization. I'm not
yeah,
going to plug names and stuff, but like if anybody wants to know about some cool connector softwares that connect people, there's a lot of cool stuff happening that
there
can really
is.
change
Yeah.
culture. So yeah, um, trying to stay ahead of it. I think it's quite
Yeah.
there's a
True.
maze of apps and programs. Like I follow on LinkedIn, people are like, here's the 20 new apps.
Sure. I see those too.
Oh my goodness. It's cool though.
Yeah.
It's good competition. Promotions we talked about, like how do you do the process, the transparency to that. It's consistent. There's some structure to it, and just be careful, not too bureaucratic, but it's getting that sweet spot of how promotions are done, when they're done, who's involved, and training managers, right, of potential unconscious biases. They look like me, right? I mean, it's just it happens, and so let's talk about it. How do we make sure that we're testing our processes and training around that? And then variable pay, like how do you do your bonus design, right? How's that? Is that equitable? Is that fair? What are the metrics? How you set goals, right? How do you measure performance? So sometimes we do a lot of just checking even variable pay design from a DEI or human centered lens, going, does this make sense? Right? And
Mm.
how we set the criteria, who's involved, do they understand how it works even? Right? Sometimes it's a mystery box. Oh, I got, is that a Christmas bonus? Like, no, it's not. It actually was driven by our profitability, and you had something to do it. Like, there's some, and then where does that appeal and pathway? So, like, if I'm not happy with what I got, is there a process where I can appeal it and ask questions? Even just having that clarified versus like, can I ask a question? Yes, you can. It's okay, right? And so there was a company that was incentivizing people to ask comp questions, like, come ahead, we'll give you a gift card, like, come and have a comp 101 with us. We have an open,
Oh, interesting.
hour
Yeah.
working hours, so we're incentivizing people to come ask comp questions. So there are ways to change the culture around comp. It's sometimes it's like they don't want to talk about it, or they feel like if they ask, they're going to get tagged. Oh, that person asks too much. Like, so I think you have to create safe cultures around talking about
Oh,
the
yeah.
boards. Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of comp and just kind of everything surrounding that, what should we consider for benefits and well-being programs from that human-centered design like you've been speaking about?
Thank you. Yeah. So like, as we kind of round, we did a lot on comp because that's the kind of heavy foundational piece, but there are all these
Yeah.
other pieces that connect around that wheel. So I always start with, and I've used this slide for many years. So I do a lot of talks around just well-being and mental health. And it's such an important piece to think about the biases that are there just because somebody's has maybe an illness or disability that they can't do any work at all, or that they look fine, so they must be fine. So there are so many things in biases, and I think that's just really important that we continue to really anchor and understand
Mm.
the complexities of mental health and well-being, and the intersectionality with things, and then I think also just from a gender piece. So I've done some talks around the intersection with gender, and there was this study through the World Health Organization that doctors are more likely to diagnose women with depression versus men with the exact same symptoms. So this is like
Huh.
a global study. And so there's this, you hear people, these stories, right? And so it's like not giving up on your health journey, right? Maybe you need a second advice. Maybe you can kind of even find a doctor. Sometimes it's just even finding a practitioner, getting help virtually or even in person. But I always think like not giving up on our story or figuring out maybe there's another way or another opinion. But I just thought this was an interesting stat, not to go too deep today, but I think starting with the well-being mental health side is understanding some of these things that are biases, not even in our own organization or with our providers. Like I used to work and do work with like disability processes, so we ensure that the people adjudicating these claims are always following the process. Talk to the manager, do this, offer these services, and if they didn't, they were breaking my SLA and they wrote me a check. Actually, so I had a head of HR going, "Are we revenue producing?" I'm like, no, but I couldn't shop the disability provider. You wouldn't let me. So we
Yeah.
so we built in the contract. This is how disability claims are done. If there's mental health related, you do this. And if you break the process, you write me a check. So that we don't even
There
know where
you
to
go.
put this. We don't have a revenue stream. But I tell you that because I really and am passionate about it, and there are ways to work with our partners and claims providers and provide in this space to show up better for our employees and for their family matters when it matters the most. And when those processes and the scripts aren't being used and the tools aren't being provided consistently, it creates stress for people that are already stressed out, right? Like I'm off and now I'm not getting paid, but why did I get declined? This space, and it's just such a part where I really dig into it with our providers that are like, you're an extension of my team. It matters how you treat my employees. So
Yeah.
enough of the BS. But also, they're also a company that might be going through something. And so go to the claims center, go and talk to them, understand their processes and why maybe they can't fulfill the services that you've agreed to. So, yeah. I could
Yeah.
go on about that one, but I think it's important that you don't give up.
Very good.
It matters. And then this is LinkedIn did a post of like 10 inclusive employee benefits. So, I think we can all research the stuff and say, but I think it's understanding like, where do you stand with this stuff? Who are your providers? Are they offering these things? Do you have a benefits broker that's talking about these things to say, yeah, only 10% of your peer group has these, but if you did it, you'd be winning, right? Right? So where do you play versus win in your benefit strategy? So think of it from that lens. How do you create more personalized, flexible benefits? There's different types of families. There's different things popping that are important for organizations to figure out where they stand as from a market perspective, from a global perspective, and there's different cultural sensitivities, right, with this stuff. So that's okay. But if you don't write it down, how are you going to work the plan, build the plan, right? So
Mhm.
really
Yeah.
understanding where you stand, ask different questions of your providers, and then it's like, yeah, only 10% offer gender affirming benefit. If you guys did that, you'd be in the top. No one else does that. Here's what it means. Are you ready for the change manager, the communication around that, what that means, right? You may get questions from employees. Why are we offering? Like, that's fine. Invite the questions. So it's a readiness too when you do these things.
Yeah. Just being prepared. I like that.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to do this one in a progressive reveal, but I didn't get the formatting, so it's like 12 blocks. But I was like, when we worked on like our short-term disability policy, we looked at the definition of family and be as inclusive, like, maybe it was an elder, right, from an indigenous perspective that passed away, or that so making, would they not get time for that? What that means to them, right? What is their definition of family? And so trying to thinking about our policies to be flexible, gender neutral, like just really being conscious. So I just kind of put the boxes of like disability benefits, childcare, affordability, like internet. Sometimes that matters in a market in terms of access to the internet. More remote spaces, like are we providing booster? Like so, like even just like little ones are popping in as trends now that I'm like, ooh, I haven't seen affordable connectivity pop up in much research, but it came up in my research
Yeah.
for today. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one too. Like sometimes it's like you go to a remote place, like we can't access anything. So can you help us if we're asking you to go work in somewhere remote? Mental health support, of course, flexible work arrangements, that's fun, right? Hybrid, fully back to office. Oh, that is the whole thing.
RTO's still going on.
Oh yeah, it's happening. It's like interesting. It's just gotta be transparent dialogue, be honest. But I think it's a really interesting one that I won't go
Mm.
too far today. Employee resource groups, equitable access, policy language, definition of family, financial wellness, the whole family, not just the employee, and who your vendors are, right? So again, just going to you're going to get copies of this stuff. Again, if you want to go deeper, we can, but it is a area that you can start to say, where do we want to play? Where do you want to win? Who are my partners? Talk to your employees, get the conversation going because there could be things in here you're like, okay, we're going to hit two of these, but then we're going to put these ones in the parking lot. That's part of our future roadmap, and really
Mm.
thinking through that. It's you got to be thoughtful about this stuff. You can't just turn it all on, right? So,
Yeah, totally. And
okay.
and as part of being thoughtful, what are some of those examples of data insight and strategies and best practices for total rewards redesign?
Yeah, so I think to kind of summarize, getting kind of the employee and leadership insights. So there's obviously the survey focus groups we talked about, those stay interviews, which people are doing these things. It's just, are they with the same intention? So it's kind of going, well, why are we asking the questions? What questions are we asking? I think that's the challenge. It's not a new, oh yeah, survey focus group, Sean, of course, yes, but it's like, what are you asking? How are you doing it, right? What is the sequence of the survey and then the focus group? How are you using AI and technology to do sentiment analysis in a protected way? It's like it's not going out
Yeah.
into the interweb, right? So being careful of what tools you're using. Segmentation, looking at different equity groups, and obviously your HR technology partners. Some are investing in AI at different degrees, chatbots to more analysis and data analytics. And there are some really cool DEI focused, human-centered focused softwares that I've been aware of that are doing that help organizations collect data in a trusted way that's not their core HR system. So I've been doing a lot of research of finding where you can say these are groups to watch and this is how you're paying this. So there's some really cool softwares that are in this space focused on it that those software organizations are actually coming from that perspective of like, how do we make this a better experience? Get the data to be able to do those insights. I'm just loving the space, and then privacy and trust, of course, of the data. So that's critical, and I think it's just a matter of having a sense of like, does your current providers have anything? If not, maybe do some research. Um, but you don't want to over survey people and do like, oh my God, another focus group. Oh my gosh, another focus group. So I think a little bit of like, how do we add this to current, intake and processes? Can we
Mm,
just change some questions, bolt on some questions? Sometimes you can kind of survey to death and people are just like, okay, enough, right? So
yeah.
always conscious of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did put this one together because we talk about AI, and I was just at an event talking about AI in the workplace, and I mean, in an hour it can change. Like after this call is
Totally.
done, there'll be another. So I mean, you want to use it where you can and be transparent with data, how it's being with the employees, how it's being used. You're trying to automate things just to make it faster. I think that's why the intention versus actually like doing it now is because we have tools that can allow us to
Mm,
understand data. That's actually where we want to do this, but we don't have the data or we can't get to the insight. It's so much manual work to calculate and to figure. Now with some of these tools, that's why I really wanted to give a little bit of air to this, is that actually this allows us to actually design properly because it can be just not an intention or something on the board. It's like, no, this is actually, we're going to move this chess piece and we're going to play the game now. We're going to move across the board. And with AI and technology, you can start to do that to look at the intersectionality of from your employee groups and demographics to your compensation benefits data and do that. And there's some things evolving like voice activated neuroscience informed systems. And oh, there's so many things happening. It's like it's just tapped to my brain. Like I'm like, come on, But
yeah.
after 25 years, my next 25 look he feels like it's going to be it's going to be very technology heavy, with the precautions of privacy and protection. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
So bringing it all home, we've heard a lot about human-centered design and total rewards and kind of marrying those. What can an organization start or restart to bring that human-centered design approach to total
yeah,
rewards?
awesome. Thank you. So I think I kind of put these questions together to round us out. So, how can this accelerate your organizational goals? So kind of go back to that visual of like, what is your org business strategy? Like, what are you trying to achieve, grow new markets, protect revenue, whatever, what is that, right? From a financial, but also from a people perspective, what's the cultural goals that you have in terms of human-centered approaches and improving engagement and retention and all that? Are your practices consistent and inclusive? And are you comfortable with that? And then sometimes, depends who you ask, some might think they are, right? So you got to round the corners of the bases of those perspectives. And then how do you measure the impact, right? So think about those metrics, right? Revenue per employee, safety, engagement, turnover, regrettable turnover, different metrics to see if you're actually making a difference. So pick 3 to 5 things. So you have that monthly, quarterly dashboard, have your benefits broker provide maybe new data and a different way of utilization of things. So just getting a sense of your baseline so that as you make changes and improvements, you can see did it do something for the bottom line or for our organization or the culture. And then I put together these 5 questions. So we do need to send a copy of this to people if they would like these questions. That these are the things you can kind of put into your focus groups and surveys. So does the policy procedure, this is going to be any total rewards policy, consider different lived experiences or chairs people that people
Mm,
come into the day with or into life? Will it disproportionately affect some groups in the organization? This is asking like very point like or you're like, I don't know. If you don't know, you got to do some research. But if you know, you're like, oh, why do I think it does that? It just creates a whole other conversation. Does a policy procedure give equal opportunity and access to all workplace groups? Right? Again, who might answer the question might have a different perspective on that. Does your company outline ways for employees to voice concerns? That's that piece of a pathway for appeal and further knowledge and understanding why I didn't get promoted or how that was a decision on my bonus or whatever it was. is there a way for them to voice concerns and where they can investigate and act on those complaints or concerns or questions? And does it avoid language that excludes groups and makes assumptions about others in terms of that job description that you write or whatever you're looking for, and thinking about the language, does it exclude groups? And sometimes it does. And we just did it intended because we've had the same HR handbook since 1999. And so that if it's more than a few years
Yeah.
old, it probably has some language in there that uses he instead of they, maybe, or something more neutral. So just
Yeah.
a time block on those. There's some common pitfalls. Just being inconsistent in your programs, access and quality, just focusing on the comp and ben and reward. Look at the whole wheel, right? Career opportunities, work environment, leadership, focusing just the costs, but also the benefits. So both sides of the coin, right? And then it's not connected to your strategy, or there's measurement issues, which is always the pain. So just when you're building out your strategy, you're thinking about how do I do a human-centered, just do it right. Thinking about what you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, and just think about how do you avoid these things and have a bit of a mitigation strategy for that up front.
Yeah.
And then that was my last slide. Oh, we did it in
There you
an
go.
hour. I surprised myself. So there you go.
Well, I want to give you some time here to think about what would you say to someone, say there's someone here on the webinar who is in full agreement. They're like, yeah, we need to do this,
Yeah,
and I appreciate all of these great best practices, but
yeah,
I'm struggling to either know where to start or
yeah,
how to get that buy-in. I know I asked a question about this
yeah,
earlier, but
yeah,
what would you say to a viewer like that?
yeah. I think it comes to, I think depending on the size of the organization, but I think if you're kind of leading the people department, it's kind of being clear about the business case, right? Like the why. It's having those conversations, whether it's a owner operated like family run company or not. It's really getting into what's keeping them up at night, what's working. So really starting with what's our business strategy, how are we doing financially? People costs are usually the biggest, right, part of our, right? Benefits keep going up and up. So we're looking for opportunities where there's a bit of a window of saying, well, what's the why? And we
Mm,
have a plan to improve that. And there are some studies here that show by investing in this, there's a impact to the bottom line or revenue per FTE or all those, regrettable turnover goes down. Does that matter to you? What matters? So I think it's having those like kind of upfront, like what matters, which helps you show what measures and where you might invest or prioritize. The other
mm,
thing we've done is having those quick survey focus groups where we did that before, where we could see that what leaders thought was important to employees was different than what employees thought was important. So they're like, oh, they love the discount program. And the
yeah.
employees are like, yeah, it's okay. Oh,
Fine.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
good 20 years ago, but with the prices and change, it's not as great. So you think you're winning on that, but you're not. So having a little bit of like you know, come to an alignment of like, oh, that's what they value. That's their preferences. That's where they're satisfied or not. Just having that initial survey focus group for kind of leaders, mid-management, staff, and let the data kind of show that's what they wanted and just
Mhm.
diving into that space. So that can also help too. Yeah, those are kind of where I would start. It's tied to the business strategy, what's keeping people up at night, the dollars and cents. If you don't know how to read your company's P&L, figure out how to read it and what's coming in, what the forecast look like. I know sometimes it's scary for some folks, like, oh man, but yeah, sit with finance and understand because that's going to prepare you to have those people conversations. Because when you go to a CEO, and I've talked to many CEOs, ultimately they make the final decision or it goes to the board. They want HR to come with recommendations, the risks, the ideas, the options, but also, ultimately go hear the risks, be clear, be vetted. So yeah, I definitely recommend being very prepared for those conversations, but know where the decisions lie. Yeah.
Yep, I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I love your perspective. I
Thank
always
you.
appreciate getting to chat with you and hear from you. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And to all of our viewers, please feel free to connect with Sean on LinkedIn. We will get a copy of these slides afterwards and we'll send out the recording. But connect and make sure that the conversation continues. We'd really love that. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. I'd like to pass it over to Hester with HR.com to kind of finish things out. And thank you.